Imagine this. Seasoned actors and improvisers gather around a table with microphones and play a role-playing game.
But not Dungeons and Dragons. No, they play their own formats and systems, or ones where the rules are streamlined and easy to follow, much like an improv game.
Now, imagine these games with all their zany jokes and character quirks and ridiculous encounters, but imagine them realized, embellished, fleshed out, activated, and brought to life so that you hear everything as it unfolded in the performers' heads.
Sound intriguing, interesting, impossible even? Don't answer.
Welcome to 20-Sided Stories, an improvised role-playing podcast.
I'm Jessica.
I'm Travis.
I'm Emily.
I'm David.
And I'm Sage. And with immersive sound design, an original music score, and full ensemble casts of voice talent, we're going to take you into a variety of familiar worlds and genres, changing every season with an original story and brand new characters to meet, all woven together on the spot.
It's the comedy of an improv podcast, but with a cohesive, complete story.
Yeah, you can't definitely not
Attack it!
Why?
Beat it up!
Why?
Because it's
bird.
You gotta hurt
You gotta
this
hurt
animal.
it, and so that you can capture it, and he's yours.
Is that what the plan is?
You gotta catch him all.
that animal.
My God!
It's the adventure of an actual play podcast, but you feel like you're right there with us.
We don't have time. We have to get to the Green Chapel now.
You idiots are traveling too slowly for adventuring.
I have a 5'2" man on my back at all times.
Steph, get off of her back and do your own walking.
One of your steps is like 4 of mine.
Then you better giddy up, haven't you?
All right, fine. You have to tell me if something's coming. I can't see over tree lines.
Can somebody get him some stilts?
Make me some, wizard.
I can't hear you down there.
It's the polish of an audio drama, but not even we know what's going to happen next.
Roll for power, Masha.
What is it? Okorella.
An epic audio quest to tell the best story possible in every genre imaginable.
Embark now on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your app of choice.
I've always believed that all those romantic stories where you just meet that special someone and the world just changes are just another capitalist scam. But our story is not one meant for Facebook walls or Twitter threads or big budget Yankee Hollywood movies. This way, when I find you, you'll have records of all the times I thought of you. Isn't that romantic? Seal, I can't wait to kill you. You're a god. If I pray to you, would you like it? Is that what I need to do to see you again? It wouldn't be the first time that I'm on my knees for the interest. Shit. I look back at the rest of the objects and I can hear the voices inside me, inside my chest, my head, my stomach. Read me, touch me, lean in. When I stare at the cup, there is just silence. When I wrap my hands around it, I expect the wax to burn me, but it is lukewarm, it's pleasant. I lift it and I drink it. Drink, drink, drink.
Dose after you. Find it wherever you listen to podcasts.
Lamplight Radio Play is an anthology podcast adopting the short horror fiction of Lamplight magazine. Our stories are spooky, unsettling, and a slow burn. And to show you what we're about, we present this 2-minute short, A Talk with the Falling Girl.
Okay, this is an EVP. It's June 21st, 12:55 a.m. We're at the former site of the Oakdale Mansion. As an attempt at using Jamie's EMF booster, we're going to try to summon the apparition of what locals call the fallen girl. Guys ready?
I'm ready.
I'm ready. Here we go. We're running. Battery's at 95%. You guys see that, right?
Call the fire department. Did you call the fire department? Hello, there are people still in there. Call the fire department. Is she talking to us? Is that a cell phone?
Not a phone.
We need to get to a phone. Hey, it's okay.
Jamie, turn it off.
The fire's over. It's all done. Everyone inside, where is everybody? Don't worry. It's over. You can calm down.
Dude, turn it off!
We're down to 40% already.
What about Jake? Jake Haddon. He's really tall and he's skinny. He's got black hair tied in a ponytail. Look, I know it was scary, but everything's okay now. No. Jake was with me in the attic. The only way he could have gotten out is if he had jumped and you would have seen him. It's okay. It's all over now.
15%.
It's a yes or no question. Was anyone else stuck in that house?
Everybody's okay. Everybody made it out.
You are a fucking liar.
Hey, are you okay?
Yeah.
She touched you, right?
Touched you?
She did.
Holy crap!
Oh, Jesus Christ.
We got that.
Oh, my God. Yeah, we got it. I don't know at what expense, but yeah, we got it. Oh, God, that poor girl.
How long till we try again?
Never, ever.
Come on.
Lamplight radio play. Quiet horror. Unsettle your ears.
Sure I can't get you a drink?
They'd had a moment, hadn't they? That afternoon when Garrett had smiled just like this, warm-eyed and amused in a way that made Tony want another cigarette, but also want to step forward and...
Hey, Kate, what are you writing?
Ah!
New text post on Thursday, May 21st.
Title: Why You Should Be Watching Selkirk. So, Selkirk fandom, who wants to read my 5,000-word essay, Garrett, last name, Secret Werewolf?
I'm Kate, by the way.
They kissed?
I think I lucked out when I found Selkirk. Because if I'd loved something else, I would have made friends, and I would have been able to read a ton of great stories. But this way, I met you. Me and Day You, a new story about love and fandom from the Procyon Podcast Network.
Hi, this is Alexander, one of the members of the team bringing you the PodTales programming you just listened to. PodTales is committed to free, accessible programming to explore and celebrate the art of creative fiction podcasting. This means our live panels are captioned and ASL interpreted, the episodes in our podcast feed have accessible transcripts, and all our programming is free. But in order to make all of that happen, we need support from fans, creators, and listeners like you. If you can, the best way to help PodTales grow is through a monthly contribution over on our Patreon page. Any amount that you can offer gets you year-round access to our Discord server, early access to episodes, updates from PodTales headquarters, and more. Check out the goals on the page for some cool plans we have coming soon. Head on over to patreon.com/podtales to make your contribution today. Help us keep PodTales free and accessible, and help us celebrate the incredible world of fiction podcasting. Again, that's patreon.com/podtales. Thank you.
I saw a war coming. It's the Dead Eyes.
Dead Eyes will never beat visionaries. That's how evolution works.
It doesn't matter why I did it. You are standing here because of it.
Me. This is my assignment. You work under me.
Rebel against the Archseer.
Stop saying what you can't and start doing what you can. I'm not running.
If they rebel, we will win.
Ash to flame!
Flame to ash!
Visionaries, an audio drama, wherever you listen to podcasts.
I think... yeah, it'll be great.
Oh, most definitely.
I mean, what is this? Once a year, we come together for celebration. We come together for discussion. We come together for... What else do we come together for?
Fun? Yeah. It's part of celebration, isn't it? Transfiguration?
No.
Revision? Refinement? Revolution? Development? Exploration?
Yes. Exploration, thank you. We come together for exploration. After all, we exist whether we like it or not, and we do not exist alone whether we like it or not.
As big as the world is, it's still very small.
Yes, the sea even more so. So vast and deep that to ponder its depths for too long is known to cause feelings of existential dread. What lies beneath? As vast as the ocean is, how vast and varied are those who call it home. Celebration, discussion, exploration, that's why we're here. The mermaid, beautiful and terrifying. That's why we're here. But to celebrate the mermaid, must we isolate them in the process?
No, and I don't think anyone is asking you to.
Yeah, but mermaids are why we're here.
Yes, and they are here. Plus, I mean, it makes sense. They have lives.
They do have lives. And in those lives, they exist, and they do not exist alone, so... yeah, it'll be great.
Oh, most definitely.
That was...
Dallas Wheatley as the reassuring friend.
And Sade Oyamakinwa as the worrier. Sound design by Chroma. Come on in, the water's fine. Season 2. Mermaids and Other Monsters. 4 different episodes. 4 different conversations. Join us Wednesdays in May. Listen on Spotify, Radio Public, Podchaser, and many other wonderful podcatchers. We'll see you soon.
Enter the Dreamnasium, a world of science and fiction without limits, where humanity has spread among the stars.
Mama used to say the universe was a wheel, with Terra Primus at the center and alternate Terras spread along the spokes.
Do you know, in my youth, I dreamed of this place. A place of stars above and below. A place of darkness and beauty.
I have left your atmosphere. Proceeding to rendezvous point.
You going to be able to handle this? On your own, I mean.
Where mystery and intrigue meet.
I've never had anyone look at me that way before. Like you recognize me. And I sort of feel the same, but we've never met.
Hold on. We're tracking something. Target inbound at 0.58 luminol. Think it's your friends?
They're not my friends. They're not anyone's friends.
This is Terra Nova 3 bug. I wait too long, I stay open too long, I'm dead.
Filled with denizens who delight and despair.
You have got to be kidding me with these heels. And this body? Have you seen this?
It's a little hard to miss, kid.
Okay, so what do we know?
He likes red? To wear, I mean, just red, neck to heel.
We see you. Your life, your solitude must be crushing. Even for one such as you.
Where just surviving can be a struggle.
Faster than anyone I've ever seen.
That's no. How can that be?
I just know I'm in danger. I've been followed, you see. Men in dark suits with dark cars.
They're hurting me. Well, they're in for a shock. I don't get scared, I get cold inside. And then someone gets hurt.
Pendant Productions proudly presents a new sci-fi anthology show, Jeffrey Thorne's Dreamnasium, on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, and more. Or download directly via pendantaudio.com.
This is so exciting. Aren't you excited?
It is a very promising development.
You scared?
No. Luke led me down to I don't know where. As we left the pitch black of the stairs, we met a long corridor, wide enough for wheeling parts to the elevator at the back. The sound changed. The street outside was muted. We lost the creaking of the ceiling. Instead, we could hear movement. Scratching of tiny nails, scampering to hide away from a foreign noise. We brought in breath and step and conversation in a place which had been silent for an age. Every room was dormant. The walls were concrete corner to corner. Indents were left on the ground where once was something heavy, now empty. Except one. After getting our bearings, we found an old office with a cracked leather couch. This was our spot. So we stopped, sat down. Luke pulled out 2 bottles, and we toasted to our closed-down ghost town.
PodTales is committed to free, accessible programming to explore and celebrate the art of creative audio fiction. That means our live panels are captioned and ASL interpreted. The episodes in our podcast feed have accessible transcripts, and all our programming is free. Free. But in order to make all that happen, we need support from fans, from creators, from listeners like you. If you can, the best way to help PodTales grow is through a monthly contribution over on our Patreon page. Any amount that you can offer gives you year-round access to our Discord server, early access to episodes, and more. We have some really exciting things planned. Head on over to patreon.com/podtales to make your contribution today. Help us keep PodTales free and accessible, and help us celebrate the incredible world of audio fiction. Again, that's patreon.com/podtales. Thanks.
What is that?
That appears to be a twister! Made of snow and light?
But, is that even possible?
I don't think so, but it's happening anyway, and we're just gonna have to deal with it!
100 years after Dorothy's adventures, 2 cousins are swept from Kansas to a mysterious land.
Allow me to welcome you to the land of Oz.
Oz?
Full of strange and wondrous people.
Call me Felina.
I'm tired of living on the streets.
I will not tolerate any rule breaking from you.
But they can't forget what they left behind.
My mom is the only person I have in the whole world right now. Right before I ended up here, she and I got into a big fight. I can't let that be the last time I spoke to her.
And their new companions have troubles of their own.
Am I to stay up here and rot in a city full of tinker toys that will break and have no one here to fix them?
This is the 4th school I've been to in a year. I keep having to switch so no one catches on that I'm a witch.
Jessica, you are not the only one with family to get back to.
Many trials lay in their path.
Beware the wheelers?
What's a wheeler? What makes it forbidden?
I don't want to find out! Go left!
And the way ahead is not always clear.
Don't you hammerheads get it yet? The wizard is gone. Glinda is gone. There's nobody left in Oz who can help you, and probably no one who wants to.
But hope is not lost.
There's no time to lose. It's very important that you get to Emerald City and ask for Ozma's help.
How do we start for Emerald City?
Why, the same way people have done it for hundreds of years. Hit the bricks.
Hit the Bricks is a radio play set in the land of Oz. Subscribe at a podcatcher near you and follow us on twitter.com at hitthebrickspod. Transcripts are available at hitthebricks.com.
Reeling up into it, all you gotta do is hit the bricks.
I know that you can do it.
Hit the bricks.
Who will you find on the Chimera?
A light-eating space monster?
A 7-foot-tall heretical catman.
The human hacker, gadgeteer, and technophile.
A galactic lawyer from the wrong side of the Akashic Bleed.
A living financial instrument.
Sort of like a rhino centaur, almost.
Hamster people?
Chinchilla people.
Chinchilla people, excuse me.
The Bog Witch of Zed.
The Honorable Lord Mayor.
A bright red, mustachioed land manatee.
Technicolor werewolf guys.
Janelle Monáe.
Yeah, she's Janelle Monáe. Exactly. This is the halfling Janelle Monáe.
The Chimera. Unexpected characters in unlikely situations.
This is Just Press Playhouse.
Wind the watch now, son. We'll help you defeat him.
You can't keep me away from him! I am Animal Caracas! I am more powerful than you can possibly imagine!
Stay away from our son, you bastard!
No! Impossible! Where is his power coming from? It's not supposed to be this way! The Sunstone is mine!
This is the power of love!
You're out of time, Caracas. You can't get rid of me forever. I'll find a way back to your dimension. I'll be back for you.
Me and my watch will be here waiting.
Ah! The light! It's tearing me apart!
Go home and let me sleep. I'll talk to you mañana.
But, Carmelita, she's so sad. Abuelo said they canceled Christmas this year.
What? Christmas is canceled? Who says?
Abuelo.
You don't think Santa wouldn't do that, would he?
All I know is Santa needs light to show him the way to all the boys and girls on Christmas Day. And if there ain't no luces, not even a spark, then Christmas in Borinquen will be sad and dark.
I'm sorry, I was curious. Here, take the doubloon back.
It's too late. Because you took the kiss and the coin, you are now cursed for the rest of your days. You will never experience love again. And wherever you go, people will revile you, spit at you. They'll want to hurt you, and you shall have to do unspeakable things to survive. The only way to remove the curse is to throw your coin into this well. Good luck finding it again.
And just like that, she was gone.
Yo! I was listening by the doorway the whole time, girl. That was badass. You told him where to stick it.
I think I'm gonna throw up.
That's just the adrenaline. I feel the same way every time I'm on stage.
I've been on stage plenty, remember?
And you will again, which is why I made you these.
What is it?
Ballet shoe balloons. To remind you to keep dancing. Keep chasing your dreams.
Thanks, Finn. You chase your dreams down, too.
Where are they, Pop? Where does he keep them?
There will be great tribulation unmatched from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be seen again.
Pop? Pop! Where does he keep them, huh? Tell me, where are they?
Door. In the back. There's a cellar.
See? That wasn't hard. Could have avoided this whole mess.
Verily I say unto you, lest these days be cut short, none of us will be saved.
Yeah, we'll just have to figure out a way around that too.
I notice that your first destination is Arabella, but that's not on your way.
It's the first destination the writer went to. It's sacred.
Oh, how excited are you? On a scale of 1 to 10.
1 billion.
I thought the waters at Coast Venus were clear. That's something else.
Visitors. Of course.
You're Captain Valeria, right? Of the Ultramarine?
Yup, that's me. And that's her, the Ultramarine.
Sentimentality is a virtue of ours. It is ingrained in our people.
I'm sure such a thoughtful gift will cheer her right up.
One of the most important people we have to meet is in Arabella.
Who was this person?
No one knows, actually.
Signed Venus, Part 1. Listen on May 27.
Do you two know anything?
Hi there, this is Jordan Stillman, one of the members of the team bringing you the PodTales programming you just listened to.
PodTales is committed to free, accessible programming to explore and celebrate the art of creative audio fiction. That means our live panels are captioned and ASL interpreted, the episodes in our podcast feed have accessible transcripts, and all our programming is free. But in order to make all of that happen, we need support from fans, creators, and listeners like you. If you can, the best way to help PodTales grow is through a monthly contribution over on our Patreon page. Any amount that you can offer gets you year-round access to our Discord server, early access to episodes, updates from PodTales HQ, and more. Check out the goals on the page for some cool plans we have coming soon. Head on over to patreon.com/podtales to make your contribution today. Help us keep PodTales free and accessible, and help us celebrate the incredible world of audio fiction. Again, that's patreon.com/podtales. Thanks.
Ragged Foils presents The Art of Ambition by Mark L. Burrow.
So, I stand behind this desk and talk to myself and turn around, talk to the clock. The clock. My only friend. Let me take you back to my great-grandfather's era. Fredo, get them a drink. It's on me. Funny thing about sitting at the counter, you get to eavesdrop. The whole thing is a mystery, he told me. How one guy could turn up each day, earn the respect of his customers, then simply disappear into thin air.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage, Mr. Austin I. Mumbo!
Cheers.
What were you?
Welcome to PodTales 2020. I'm Jeff Andreessen, one of the organizers of PodTales. We're so excited to be putting on programming devoted exclusively to imaginative audio storytelling throughout the month of November. Today, we'll be treating you to the panel Complicating Representation. Thank you so much for joining us. At the top of this program, we would like to offer a land acknowledgement, a statement that pays respects to the indigenous people who live here and who have had their land stolen from them by colonizers. It is only the very first, barest step in what we can do to support indigenous people today. The following acknowledgement of what to keep in mind as we participate in this digital space is written by Adrian Wong of Spiderweb. Since our activities are shared digitally to the internet, let's also take a moment to consider the legacy of colonization embedded within the technology, structures, and ways of thinking we use every day. We are using equipment and high-speed internet, not available in many indigenous communities. Even the technologies that are central to much of the art we make leave significant carbon footprints, contributing to changing climates that disproportionately affect indigenous people worldwide. I invite you to join us in acknowledging all this, as well as our shared responsibility to make good of this time, and for each of us to consider our roles in reconciliation, decolonization, and allyship. Next, I would like to thank our sponsors, Sarah Lawrence College and the Sarahs, Fool and Scholar Productions, Fable and Folly, Sleep With Me, The Gauze Media, and Winter Hill Brewing Company. These are major contributors who helped sustain PodTales 2020 and allowed our show to continue virtually this year. Learn more on our website sponsor page. PodTales 2020 is completely free. We believe in making the resources we're creating available and accessible to all. If you like what we're doing here and you have the means, please consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/podtales. ASL interpretation for this session will be provided by Brandon C. Kazan-Maddox of Body Language Productions. Learn more about Brandon's work at brandonkazan-maddox.com. Please feel free to use the chat feature here on YouTube to say hello and ask a question of our panelists today. I'll be keeping an eye on the conversation, and we'll pose a few of these questions to the group before the end of the hour. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Elena Fernandez-Collins, a podcast critic and forensic sociolinguist living in Portland, Oregon. They host the podcast Radio Drama Revival, write about podcasts with their own website, the Bellow Collective, the AV Club, Discover Pods, and curate their own newsletter, Audio Dramatic. You can find them spending too much time on Twitter at Showmark, where they would probably like to talk to you about marketing, equity, and justice, and reading way too many sci-fi and fantasy books. Take it away, Elena.
Thank you, Jeff. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Complicating Representation panel. We're really excited to have you here. Before we get started in earnest, I want to warn the audience that we will be discussing racism, sexism, domestic abuse, queerphobia, and transphobia in both the context of creating art that deals with it as marginalized creators who have faced these events at some point. So please take care of yourselves. Additionally, this is a panel specifically dedicated to discussing the complexity involved in depicting or exploring personal experiences as a marginalized artist in society. We cannot and will not discuss everything there is to say about this topic in under an hour. We may say things that you don't agree with, and that's okay. So please remember to treat everyone here with respect. And with that, I'm going to start by introducing our first panelist. Ivuoma Okoro is the Los Angeles-based writer, producer, and performer of the narrative science fiction podcast Vega, a sci-fi adventure. After launching the show in late 2018, Vega won Best Writing of a New Spoken Word Production and Best Performance of a New Spoken Word Production in the 2019 Audioverse Awards. In addition to that, Ivuoma was invited to speak on Film Independent's Spring 2019 panel for narrative podcasts titled Narrative Podcast Stories and Sound. You can find her on Twitter at Ivuoma Okoro. That's IVUOMA OKORO. So I'm going to introduce each panelist one at a time. And then after I introduce you, Ivuoma, please tell us about your fiction podcast or podcasts and what norms you want to challenge via that story.
Yeah, thank you. So my fiction podcast, it is a high genre sci-fi adventure podcast, which is in the title. So yeah, I mean, it's about a bounty huntress who is after a terrorist who attacked her hometown. It is so the main character is black, and there are a lot of black people in it, a lot of black and brown people. I mean, I think the main thing I wanted to challenge with it was actually religious norms, and more specifically, what happens when a religious power or like a religious majority has political power. So yeah, those are kind of the things that I am trying to tackle with that subject matter.
Absolutely. Everyone go listen to Vega because it's amazing. So for our next panelist, we have Will Williams, who is a professional podcaster and podcast critic based in Phoenix, Arizona. They are the co-founder of Hug House Productions, where they produce Valence, an urban fantasy sci-fi podcast, and Scoring Magic, the documentary of the process of creating Valence. They are also one of the producers over at Radio Drama Revival, a showcase and interview podcast for audio fiction creators. You can find them on Twitter at WW_writes, that's Will with one L, on sites like Polygon and Discover Pods, or yelling at strangers about how cool snails are. So Will, it's your turn now. Tell us about your fiction podcast and what norms you wanted to challenge.
I want people to first understand that, like, please talk to me about snails. I really do like them very much. Valence is, as Ellie said, an urban fantasy podcast about magic users who are oppressed by both the government and a massive tech conglomerate that makes a wearable piece of technology that can limit their magical ability. If you are listening to Ellie's wonderful voice and thinking, I would like to hear more of that, Ellie does play a character in Valence. The norms I'm trying to challenge with Valence, other than, I think, the sort of complicity we have in letting tech conglomerates rule our life is we try to tackle a lot about mental health and about messy queer relationships.
Great. Thank you so much, Will. So Faith McQuinn has been a professional video editor and writer for nearly 15 years and taught film students for 9. After spending so many years helping other people realize their projects, she knew it was time to get back to making her own work. In 2015, she founded Observer Pictures in Nashville, Tennessee, with the intent to make a new project every year. To date, she's written and directed 4 short films and 2 audio dramas, which are Boom and Margaritas and Donuts. She's a huge space nerd and loves spending time with her family, watching movies, and playing games. You can find her on Twitter at FBMC. That's FBEEMCEE. Okay, Faith. Now it's your turn.
Okay. I'll talk about Boom first. It's kind of a mystery and a whole lot more about exploring trauma and recovery from trauma. And my main character is Puerto Rican and white, and I really wanted to explore the idea of young males dealing with trauma and how they have relationships with other friends. Like male friendship was a big deal for me, and then the idea of going to therapy and dealing with recovery in a healthy and maybe not always so healthy way, because Porter doesn't always deal with his trauma in the most healthy way. And then with Margaritas and Donuts, which is completely different from Boom, it was a romantic comedy about not just Black love, but 2 professional Black people over the age of 40 falling in love and having a healthy relationship and exploring not just romance, but also a sexual relationship that was healthy.
Highly recommend that everyone listen to both of those. Boom has made me cry multiple times.
So sorry.
No, we like that here. For our final panelist, Drew Denny is a documentary filmmaker and storyteller with a passion for queer stories. Drew's first podcast, Asking For It, combines her documentary ethos and her desire to authentically represent LGBTQ plus characters with her love of music. Asking For It features the music of Hips, the duo of Denny and Christina Gaillard, who make R&B dance pop. Please go stream them on Spotify. It's amazing. Drew is also the creative director of the 501c3 organization Allies in Arts, which provides support for artists in all mediums who identify as women, LGBTQIA2S, and BIPOC. You can't find her on Twitter because Drew is the smartest one of us. Take it away, Drew.
Twitter does seem like a room where everyone goes to yell at each other. And as the person here representing the podcast about domestic violence, I try to avoid rooms where everyone is just screaming. It's a step in my own healing process. But yes, Asking For It, I think the norm that we wanted to push against is the idea that domestic violence is something that is experienced only by straight folks. According to the CDC, queer identified people are just as much, if not more likely, to experience intimate partner abuse and domestic violence than our straight counterparts. We're a lot less likely to report it. And I think that's a particularly dangerous combination. I understand the inclination to keep it a secret. We want to protect our own. But I think in that desire to protect our own, we actually put our community in danger. So that said, it's a comedy podcast and there's a lot of sex in it. So I don't, so perhaps the other norm we busted was that you can't talk about something tragic without having a sense of humor.
Oh, yes. Extremely true. So with that, we're going to roll into questions. So what is the importance, both for you and for marginalized artists generally, of exploring your experiences and discussing taboos in a way that is or could be uncomfortable or extreme to others. And this can also include not incorporating parts of your experience into your story as well. So let's start with Faith.
Of course, you're going to start with me. I usually prepare for everything and did not today. So smart.
You're gonna.
Well, I'll talk about Boom mostly. This idea of dealing with trauma and deciding if you should share it with your friends or with not, and trying to represent it well. I've definitely dealt with trauma in my life, but the bigger part of it is being Black and coming from a large family and having half of them be completely supportive of therapy because most of them are therapists. I have a huge family of psychologists. And then the other side thinking that therapy is something you whisper, like, oh, that person's going to therapy. So I thought the idea of really exploring that and having it in a public space and saying, hey, it is okay, and different people deal with it in different ways was very important, especially for people of color, to know that. I've noticed that I didn't actually know that non-Black people enjoy therapy and go to it and talk about it, because I'd always grown up with half of my family saying that that was a bad idea and the other half wondering why that half isn't going to therapy.
Yeah, absolutely. My Puerto Rican and Cuban side of the family try to pretend that I don't go to therapy, which is super fun. So yeah, I feel that. Let's take it over here to Drew.
All right. I like this question. Thank you. It's funny though, because I think in asking for it, there are certain things that shock listeners that I didn't expect would be shocking. Sex scenes, for example, they sound like sex I've had. And we consume sex scenes quite often in our culture. Most of them on television don't look like sex I've had, so I didn't really see why it would be such a big deal to just throw a few in there that are more familiar. But those scenes do seem to make many people uncomfortable. We've gotten a lot of feedback about that. I've personally gotten quite a bit of feedback about them. But one thing I want to say about the representation of intimacy, because it is a decision when, in storytelling, especially narrative storytelling, to decide if and how to represent intimacy. One thing that I was really glad about with the process, since this was my first podcast, I'd never done audio only storytelling. And Asking for It is produced by Caitlin Prest of Mermaid Palace, and something that she said often through the process and then later in talking about the project at press is that she doesn't believe in fading to black, quote unquote, for the sex scenes. And, the audio version of that is to find a way to represent intimacy and to not look away or cut the mic at that point in the story. And that, I think, feels political to her. And I agree with her on that front, that it does feel important to represent intimacy that feels familiar to queer folks. At least from my perspective, I can say this feels authentic to my own experience. She has a lot of great tricks for getting the sounds right. I'll let you seek her out if you want to ask more about that. But I do feel really glad that I had that support in the production team, in my producer and the company behind the show, also the CBC, who distributed the show, never censored any of our representations of intimacy. So I feel really grateful for all of that infrastructure. And I would love to hear what you all think if you have listened. So find me, not on Twitter.
Not on Twitter. That's not helpful. Since we're talking about like the performance of things like sex and violence and queer people, I'm going to kick this over to Will.
Yeah, it feels right. Yeah. So I have always really loved media that makes me uncomfortable, which has only increased after the traumatic events that resulted in a PTSD diagnosis. For me, discomfort is what my brain is used to. So when I seek out things like horror films, makes my brain feel good because it's familiar and human brains love patterns. But I also think it's really important to show these sides of representation that are uncomfortable and unpretty. In Valence, we do this pretty consistently. We start with this protagonist, Liam, and we sort of aim to make him incredibly unlikable for quite a few episodes. We don't dive into his backstory, we just show him as he is, because I think that this is the case for lots of people you meet who have a complex and devastating mental health history. In an early episode, there is a scene in which Liam, the protagonist, talks to his friend Flynn about his suicidal ideation. And the conversation that is had is almost verbatim a conversation that I have had with my husband. And I think part of the struggle of creating for me is trying to walk the line between how much of my own self I want to put into a work and share with people I don't know. But and also part of it is the fear of not getting representation right, which I'm sure we will discuss further. But luckily I have amazing co-writers and co-creators, Katie Yeomans and Anne Baird, who consistently encouraged and supported me to be as real and authentic with my experiences as I could be, because we need more depictions of these things that are messy. I didn't know anyone else experienced my very specific suicidal ideation spirals until I made Valence and people said that it resonated with them. And I think this is something that people who are marginalized and who have erased identities can see across the board. I think it's a very universal experience with us, whether it's a frequently erased gender identity or sexual identity or something like an invisible disability. We're all we have when it comes to representation. We're all we have when it comes to making each other realize that we're not alone.
Absolutely. Thank you, Will. And Ivuoma, how about you?
Yeah, I think this is also a great question too. I feel like for my work, if people feel uncomfortable or that it's extreme, that's okay when it's honest. I feel like the most important thing is the honesty and the genuineness of it. I feel like for me, so like one of the nuggets that Vega came from, the idea of the actual plot. So she's chasing this terrorist. And one of the things that I think really sparked my curiosity when it came to like terrorism was, I think it was after the Paris-Nice attack, and there was I think ISIS claimed that they did it afterwards, and they released this like online statement that was like, brother, I actually forget the actual language, but I remember reading it and being struck by how it wasn't that far from like Christian stuff, which is the stuff that I was familiar with. It's just a different ideology, a different set of beliefs, but they like if you put I think people were so used to, I mean, here we're so used to being like, oh yeah, they're nuts, they're psycho, like people who are extreme like that, when they follow a very logical like if you sit down and look at the beliefs, there's a logic to it. It's not just like irrationality. And so I feel like for me, like even just the nature of thinking about that, like that seems extreme, like extremists is what we call them, but really it's like they're honestly just like they have a belief system that's completely different from mine. And so I feel like, one of the, I forget who says this quote, but there's this idea that one of the reasons we write and tell stories is to explore or to answer a question that we don't know. So for me, my podcast is very much like, how do I wrap my head around this fact that some people can believe some really extreme things, and my own beliefs can seem really extreme to others when it seems perfectly rational when you're in it. So this idea of tackling the differences in that and how that plays out in individual characters' lives, that's what the whole point of the story is for me, for my podcast. So I feel like if the result is that people are uncomfortable or they feel like it's extreme, those are good things, because that's a mirror to reality and it lets us further answer that question, why to further answer the question that we're even asking by telling the story.
Absolutely. And I fully encourage everyone to interrogate why you are uncomfortable whenever you listen to something that seems to make you not like when you feel discomfort. Because that leads us to the next question, which is, what critiques have you experienced or witnessed that only ever seem to crop up in force against marginalized creators, especially those who are tackling an ignored or taboo topic? And I'm going to let this be an open question for everyone. So you want to jump in?
Okay, I'm going to jump in. I have a very specific critique that I got. I've definitely gotten my fair share of not amazing critiques, but one of them was a extremely strong 1-star, telling me that my show dishonored people of color and elevated the white male gaze. And I had a lot of trouble with this. And one of those moments when you're just like, can you write me on Twitter so I can write you back? Because I have no idea what you mean. But it finally came down to the idea that because I am a Black woman, I got another review from it, because I'm a Black woman and the Black woman in my story wasn't the main character, I was elevating the male character in my story and completely ignoring the Black woman in my story. And I felt like if I had been a white male writing this, would that have ever come up? I don't know, because I am not a white man and cannot answer that. But I assume that that is not something that would have ever come up in a review of my show if I had not looked like one of my characters. So I'm curious to know if anybody else has had an experience like that.
Oh yes. Back when, so Valence is based on a series of novels that I wrote several years ago. And when I was in that stage, I was critiqued often for making my protagonist a white man, even though we have pretty much everything else in common. I have several reasons why I did it. Faith, like you, I believe, you were talking about male friendships, right?
Yes.
Okay, definitely. I thought so. Yeah. Okay. ADD meds were taken minutes before this, as everybody can attest. So male friendships are a big thing for me. I wanted to explore that, et cetera, et cetera. But also, and I don't know if this is the experience for any of y'all, I am writing from deeply personal, semi-autobiographical trauma. I really needed a layer of separation. For my mental health, I needed to not be writing just literally myself. So the best step forward for me was write from perspective of dude. That is, I am so undude. Have found out since writing the novels, I'm also ungirl, but I feel more aggressively undude than ungirl. We don't need to unpack all of that right now. Moral is, I needed a layer of separation. And I think that we talk so much about the importance of own voices, which I do think is important. But I think that we also need to have a conversation at some point about how making art through your own trauma is re-traumatizing, and it is okay. It is okay to take some levels of separation.
Mm-hmm. The slam scene agrees with you.
I
Does
100%
it?
agree.
Does the
Well,
slam scene agree with me? Because did when I left.
Yeah, the people in the slam scene who talk about, hey, maybe not with everything having to be re-traumatizing, and working off of everything that I've experienced.
You're in better slam
Drew-
scenes than I am.
Well, that's fair.
What is the slam
Oh.
scene?
Oh, poetry slam scene.
Oh.
Yeah, poetry slam.
Got
There's like the big thing about like the things that win and that get a lot of attention are always slam
Oh.
poems that are
Yeah.
rooted in like experiences with racism and queerphobia and all of these things. And it's, you know, bad to expect those things. Yeah. Hmm. Absolutely. Ivuoma, Drew, how about you? What critiques do you think about this? Drew, I think you probably have something to say about also. Oh, Ivuoma, yeah.
I mean, I can go. I don't have much. I honestly haven't gotten much critique because I feel like the things that I'm challenging, I just don't feel like many non-liberal folks are listening to the show anyway. But I'm sure I would get some flack if they were, and if they're paying kind of close enough attention. But I think that maybe kind of goes into one of the related questions about people tend to think that high genre is not political, so maybe that masks a lot of it. But yeah, we can talk about that later.
We can.
I've definitely received some critique. Asking for it. It does. Our show does not only represent sex but violence, America's two favorite things. Like, what are you complaining about? This is what everyone's talking about. But no, we do. And realistically, and that was another decision that we labored over because some scenes in the show are very unnerving to many listeners, very frightening. And I felt it was important in the same way that that we all agreed it was important to represent this intimacy realistically and authentically. It was also decided that we would do the same with violence. And all of the characters in the show are queer. So the perpetrators of the abuse are queer, the victims and survivors of the abuse are queer, and everyone makes mistakes, everyone on all sides. I think that some of the feedback has been, you know, in the vein of how dare you show us doing wrong, show us being ugly, show us being bad. And, you know, like I'm being a bad queer. And I think I understand the desire to pretend that we're all great. I'm from Texas. It's not a cool place to come out. Maybe it's better now, I don't know. But it wasn't at my time when I was 13 and did my first coming out. I've changed identity. I mean, I've come out like 6 times. My family's so over it by now. They're like, whatever, you're still going to hell. So, yeah, some of them are cool. However, many are not interested in the, you know, intricacies of my identity because it's all, doomed me to hell. Anyway, so I've been a bad queer. I've shown a truth that many of us have or will in our lives experience intimate partner abuse, which means that many of us have or will perpetrate intimate partner violence and domestic abuse in our lives. And I feel sorry to the people that are upset that I told that secret, but I think the goal, and I hope that it feels worth it, is that if someone hears this, it does sound very real, and the idea behind making it sound so real is to almost speak like subconsciously from my memories to the listeners, to give someone the moment of being like, oh my God, that sounds like my partner. That sounds like my girlfriend. That sounds like my boyfriend. That sounds like my person. That sounds like the fight we had. That sounds like the time they yelled at me. Those sound like the text messages I get all day. That sounds like the, whatever it is, to give someone that moment of being like, oh, holy shit, that sounds like my situation. And in hearing what the character comes to realize in the show very slowly and through a very flawed path, that that's not okay. And that there are people out there who want to help and who have knowledge and expertise and are therapists. There's a great therapy representation in the show. I'm very pro therapy. And so I just hope that those who might be angry that I have represented a tragic element that many of us might experience, that it's with the goal of helping folks to whom this sounds like their real lives, whether they're the person getting yelled at or the person yelling, find some kind of support.
Yeah, I think that this also touches importantly on this dichotomy, right, of everything must be joyous versus everything must be tragic for different marginalized identities, right? If you want to speak a little bit on that, anyone, I think I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about this. Yeah, this concept of being a good queer is something that I have been thinking about for a long time. Because I think everything about me is antithetical to the concept of being a good queer. I am a bisexual femme who is married to a cis man, which I think in the eyes of most queer people makes me quote unquote less queer. I am a cis passing high femme agender person, which I think to many queer people and even other trans people makes me less trans. And I have also started pursuing non-monogamy, and coming to terms with being polyamorous, which tons of queer people just think is icky and bad. So I think I am not uniquely, I am very geared to have this question of being a good queer on my mind all the time. And I don't think that there is such a thing. And in my eyes, I think that respectability politics forced onto me by the cis heteronormative patriarchal society we're in is oftentimes, in practical terms, the same as the respectability politics that I have imparted on me by other queer people. I think that not only do they often fall in line with each other, I think that largely queer politics, queer identity politics from inside the house are just replicating things outside the house. But I also think that being queer is inherently a rejection of a norm. We wouldn't need queer labels otherwise. So to be policed internally from people who are supposed to be a community, I think that we can see very clearly, first off, it's not a community. Queer people are not a community. That may be controversial, but I don't think that we are. I think that we're a demographic. I think, we're a demographic that's all oppressed in similar ways, kind of. And I think that in seeking something that feels more like a community, feels more like the good and the bad, we play into these oppressive respectability politics from the cis het standard. There is an essay. I guess I should introduce this document I've made. In case it's not clear, I think about this shit all the time and can't stop. So in efforts to make myself maybe shut up a little bit more here in the panel, and also because I can't not, I made a source document for it for afterwards in case anybody wants to read it. Like recommended reading. I have tons of articles, and one of the articles, it's the third one on the nope, it's the second one on the list, is The Next Muzzle on Sexual Expression by Anna Valens. For her newsletter she writes. Anna Valens is a trans journalist and sex worker. And this essay largely discusses how the sort of younger queer fandom-centric demographic is continuing the same respectability politics as a largely cishet world, because a lot of that demographic of young queer people, largely informed by things like fandom and Tumblr, often come from very religious backgrounds. So I think that's very interesting hearing you talk about this, Ivuoma. So seeing those things come into queer culture is terrifying to me. Highly recommend reading this essay. It's very good. I don't remember how we started this conversation. Moral is, I think queer people are mean to each other and police each other, and I reject the concept of being a good queer as much as I reject the concept of being a good woman.
Absolutely. Faith, Ivuoma, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I guess.
You don't have to if you don't want to.
No. What Will was talking about is about my personal experience and how people perceive me as a Black woman. I'm married to a white man, and I'm sure that you have seen that somehow that makes me less of a Black woman. And I like to remind people of the fact that I am Black, but my background is a whole lot of stuff. And it's mostly because my great grandfather was a slave. So, a whole lot of things play into who I am as a person. And I present as Black because I think of myself as Black, and who I'm married to, who my family is, does not matter outside of that. So I get extremely angry on a regular basis when people love to make jokes about, oh, but you married outside of your race, so obviously you hate yourself. I'm like, no, I definitely do not. But, sure, if you want to play that game. And I'm going to, like Will was saying, I'm going to try to not talk that much because I'll get extremely emotional about it and start yelling in a room of people who understand me and do not need me to yell at them about things like that. But just understand that within the community, there is as much racial strife within the Black community as there is outside of the Black community. And a lot of Black people don't want to admit that. And they need to start admitting it. Like if I had a picture of my mother next to me right now, I could talk about that. She is very fair-skinned, extremely fair-skinned, because my grandmother is Cherokee, white, Black, a whole lot of things happening. And my mother is very fair-skinned. And growing up, people told her she wasn't Black enough, or they told her she wasn't white enough. My father is dark-skinned, part Jamaican. When I was born, my grandmother cried because my skin looked like this. She was so happy that I came out darker than she was, than my mother was. So this is the kind of thing I've grown up with. So the idea of people telling me that I am less Black because of who I love is a whole can of worms that it's probably a huge reason of why I write what I write and want to keep exploring that, because like Will said, like having that layer in between, like my characters are me, but I don't need them to look like me, because then people will be very aware that they are me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just want to real quickly add to this conversation too that so it was a kind of an interesting progression for me to come to this place where I was like, I think I want to be explicit about the race of my characters, even though it really has nothing to do with the story. I think I just now this year got to a point where I was like, oh, it's important, even if the character just happens to be Black, but the plot has nothing to do with that. It is important to say who they are, because people will just default it to white, and because we have all these like default standards that people just think, oh, if you don't say anything about this, your action hero, everyone's gonna think it's a white dude, who like a cis white dude, hetero, like it is important to at least have the face, and I think I was that critiquer before. I think this story of Vega for me was the first time where I was like, I want to be explicit about it, even though it might not matter. But coming to understand, at least in America, being Black is never a neutral. It's never just it makes it a political thing, but that's only because of white supremacy. Because sometimes somebody said, "Oh, being Black is being less than," and so now, anytime that you try to, just put Blackness out there, it is making a statement. Hey, we can be heroes too. We can be a part of the hero's journey. I'm a really big fan of Afrofuturism, with this idea that there can be a future that looks prosperous and cool and exciting and something that we want to be a part of, and Black people are a part of that, and not just kind of like what your question was asking, Ellie, this idea of like it's all tragedy for Black people. I think Vega is very, very intentionally trying to paint a picture of Black joy and like Black prosperity and things like that. So
Absolutely. I really resonate with that idea about being explicit also for fat characters, especially in audio. So thank you for that addition. So I'm gonna take this to the last question that we're gonna talk a little bit about before we go to a Q&A. So Drew and Faith, you work in realistic fiction, and Ivuoma and Will, you work in high genre sci-fi. So how does genre impact your work in regards to representation? And what do you make of the assumption that high genre works are less political than realistic works? For instance, people assuming that Lord of the Rings is apolitical. Let's start, Ivuoma.
yeah, I actually enjoy this assumption. I hope people keep assuming this, because it's a great way to just explore a lot of things people don't know you're talking about. And afterwards, when you're talking about it, they're like, "What? I don't know it was about all that." So I feel like it's a very helpful thing to me. I think if my story wasn't high genre, I would have a lot of trouble talking about a lot of this stuff. So I enjoy this and hope it continues. And two, I mean, I'm one of those people who grew up, watching Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, all these things, and not understanding all the political nature of it. And so it's, I think that's the power of story. You can ingest something, you can come to have a understanding with someone else's point of view, and then later learn, oh, I can understand this person better because of this thing that I consumed that showed me that way of thinking. And so I think it's a beautiful thing, actually. And yeah, I hope people don't become too suspicious of every high genre thing that they see. But then also, I think if you do it well, it should be kind of like a hidden thing like that. I think anytime that I've been watching something and I can clearly tell I'm being preached at, is ejected me right out of the narrative. So those are a few of my thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Will, saw you making lots of agreeing gestures.
Yeah, I love that. I had never really considered this from like, yeah, keep assuming. Come on, come with me. No, it's okay. Everything is fine here. We're not talking about politics. Come watch. I love that. I think that it's brilliant. We are like very, very directly political in Valence, even though it is like a high genre concept. I'm a big fan of how genre assets like magic or some sci-fi tech can make something clearer by making a hyperbole of it. I do think that there's something to be said about the way that genre fiction is discussed on a like large critical lens. We can see this, for instance, in horror. The fact that like horror is continually snubbed by every institution. I think a lot about how people know that like Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five is like big literary fiction, but they never seem to know that it's like a buck wild, bizarre sci-fi space aliens time travel story, because people just say, "Oh, it's literary fiction." So I think there's something to be said about the way that genre fiction is disrespected when it comes to political and personal writing. But now also I'm like, no, keep underestimating.
Yeah, I love this combination of perspectives. Faith?
Now I'm like mad that I write realistic. No, I'm just kidding. Weirdly, when I started this whole thing, I never really thought that I'm going to talk about Margaritas and donuts since I've been avoiding that Black love was controversial at all. But so many people are like, "Oh, they're in a healthy relationship," and I was like, yes, because that exists. What's wrong? But I mean, I just lost the question completely. Sorry.
No, you're fine. Talking about like genre impacting your work in regards to representation and realistic versus high genre, one being more apolitical than the other.
Oh, yeah, I don't I hate to think that Black love is somehow political, but obviously, like, it's the fact that they're Black characters in it, all of a sudden somehow existence becomes political. And that I was pointedly wanting to write a story about Black love and making sure that all of the main characters were Black and that you got to see a relationship with Ron and Kat being a healthy married couple who had children who were doing their thing, and then this other love of like new love starting later in life. And I know that people come back and they're like, oh, it's so controversial, but I never really thought of it that way. I guess because it's not the struggle. TM. That's where we are. That I didn't. And I think there were people who were expecting that somewhere in the story, everything was going to fall apart and everything was going to get horrible. And I never went there. So people were pleasantly surprised and kind of shocked by it, I think.
Yeah. Drew?
Oh yeah. Well, I think that the consideration of genre is like a story by story decision. I love genre, both making it and consuming stories told in horror or speculative fiction or sci-fi. I love that stuff. And I think there's something really delicious about the construct and, how genre allows viewers to feel like, oh, that's not me. It's different. That's a whole different world. So I can separate myself and have thoughts about what's going on there that I might be, too emotional about to have about my own society or my own experience. But when it came to asking for it, it felt just obvious from the beginning that it should be a very realistic story, that it should be told in a very realistic fashion. I think the nature of depicting violence, especially domestic violence, just, bare minimum, we never wanted to sensationalize that experience, didn't want to aestheticize it. So, of course, we performed it. And Will, I could talk to you all day about reperforming trauma and that. Sidebar later. But so the violence that you hear is a performance. It's a performance by people who are acting. But both in terms of the style of performance and in the style of recording, I think there was a perfect storm. Caitlin Press plays one of the partners in the story, and Mel Shimkovitz plays the other partner. Both of them have a lot of experience performing and acting in a way that doesn't sound or feel or look like acting. And I perform the main character Goldie, and have a history with performance art, and so that felt very organic to the three of us in terms of our performance style. And my bandmate Christina Gaillard is actually my bandmate in the show. She plays my best friend. She's my best friend. So there were a lot of realistic elements in the show that, and everyone just happened to be really good at that style of performing. But also Caitlin's techniques for recording are very much rooted in realism. She has a history in audio documentary. I have a history in film documentary. Both of us came to the table wanting it to feel real. So I think that decision was made in the beginning, and then it affected everything that happened throughout the production, every decision in terms of mic placement to delivery of a line or performance of a scene. And I hope that it works. I hope that it sounds real to people, not because I want to traumatize listeners, and I'm sorry if I definitely have, I'm sorry, but because I hope if it does sound real to someone, that they seek some support and hopefully get out of that relationship. And I look forward to making a very stylized film that has nothing to do with domestic violence next. So.
Yay! Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to kick this over to Jeff, who has if we have any questions, this is the time.
We have quite a few questions, which is not surprising given that this is such an amazing discussion. You guys are killing it. First up, how do you balance raw depiction of violence and oppression versus narratives that focus on empowerment and positive outcomes?
Drew, I think that you would have a great answer to this question.
Sure. Asking for it does represent violence, but I would argue that it does also represent empowerment. I think I've been taught that the hero's journey is, a man fighting battles, killing monsters to win power and a woman. And it's not that hero's journey. It's definitely not. It's the hero's journey of a person realizing that they are being abused and deciding to take a step towards standing up for themselves. It's some people might say that's the tiniest journey, but it's an internal journey and it's actually huge. So I would argue that it wasn't really a choice of either or for us. We depicted violence in order to tell a story in which a person does struggle to empower herself and ultimately make a life-changing decision. That said, not everything I make isn't about violence.
Faith, how about you? I think that you would also have a wonderful answer to this question.
I don't really have that much to say, but yes, the same as Drew saying that all of the characters that I have are on an internal journey. They're not having some massive character change. It is just, my best friend calls it when the glass breaks. When there's something very obvious in front of you and you just don't realize it until you do. And then you're like, oh, this is how I need to move on. And I feel like in both Margaritas and Donuts and Boom, both main characters hit that glass breaking moment of realizing that this is the life I need to take. This is the journey I need to take. For Josephine, it's much sooner than it is for Porter. It takes him years, but I still think that they both experienced some sort of violence. A lot of Porter's was self-inflicted after experiencing such a horrible trauma that a bunch of his violence was self-inflicted, and he moved past that. And for Josephine, it was all emotional violence and bad relationships before she realized that I can push past that and that my past isn't the only thing that defines me.
Next question.
Next question coming up. Ivuoma mentioned writing coming from a question that you are examining. This is a rough paraphrase. In my experience, I'm wondering what questions these creators have that they've been working with.
Ivuoma, this started with you, so let's start with you.
Sure. Yeah. So again, my first question was, are terrorists insane, or are they real people who just are in a different set of circumstances and can be actually relatable? If we find ourselves in those circumstances, would we make similar choices? Things like that. And then also, yeah, just with religion, the nature of faith and doubt. And my main character, she kills people for her religion. Like, she kills evil people, bad people. And so this idea of, like, what does that mean to wield that authority? Who gives us that? And can we just take that? Things like that are some of the questions that I'm working around.
Will, how about you?
Yeah, a lot of the core questions we ask in Valence, actually, when it comes to the topics that we've been talking about here, hit a stride more in season 2. Season 1 focuses, I think, a lot on like kind of the external, and season 2 gets a little bit more intimate. So questions we seek to discuss in season 2 are things like who is capable of a redemption story? Who is worthy of a redemption story? And what is the difference between a messy relationship and an unhealthy relationship? How do we identify these things? Who is entitled to your priorities? Who is entitled to your time and your energy? Those are things that we hit pretty hard in this upcoming season.
Okay, so we've hit our time. Thank you so much. Jeff, do you want to take it away from here?
Sure. Thank you all for an amazing discussion. Thank you, Ellie. Thanks everyone for watching and listening. This session is part of PodTales 2020, three weekends of programming brought to you in partnership with the SARAs, the Sarah Lawrence College International Audio Fiction Award. For a full list of sessions, visit podtales.org. That's podtales.org. And be sure to subscribe to PodTales on the podcatcher of your choice to find the podcast showcase selections we'll be featuring from now through the end of the month on our feed. As a reminder, PodTales 2020 is completely free. We believe in making the resources we're creating available and accessible to all. If you like what we're doing here, please consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/podtales. Finally, we'd love to know what you think. You can find a panel feedback form linked both in the YouTube description below and over on the website event page. Please take a moment to fill that out and help us make PodTales better in the future. Thank you all very much.